So after you made your sketches, all right, you're gonna show me what you got going on, and then you're going to just start working in clay. I made these sketches kind of on a larger sheet of paper so that you guys can see them. All right, but the most important thing is going to be how you're gonna start your coil pot. There's two ways to start a coil pot. So this is a sample of a coil pot. Remember, we have exposed coils, we have smooth coils, okay? Option number one to start your coil pot is to have like a snake-like coil. You guys can all see that, okay? Or you can do a smooth base. So in order to do a coil, so you've got a couple of options here. However you want to start your base is really up to you guys. If you want some like crazy pattern, I would go with a rolling pin, smooth it out, and then draw out that pattern, like anything other than a circle, basically, okay? So you're gonna take some clay. And again, this is if you are so this, you can see this is a little bit very uneven, all right, but this was a piece that I just cut off the top here. So what I'm gonna do to start is I'm actually just gonna cut off this extra stuff because I want as even of a base as possible. So option number one is to roll out a base. If you want to do a base that's other than a circle, even if you're doing a circle, you can easily roll it out. It really just depends on like the type of person that you are. It doesn't matter to me how you make your base. It's really up to you guys. Because the project requires to have an exposed coil, if you want your whole pot smooth, then you need to make your base coil so that something is exposed, okay? So it's kind of like a way around the requirements. When you're rolling out your base, if that's the route you're going, make sure you pick up your clay and move it so that you don't just like smush it into the table, okay? When you're rolling, you want to think back and forth rather than pressing down. Make it as smooth as possible. Shouldn't be that difficult with a rolling pin. If the rolling pin is dirty and has stuff on it, you'll get like this like stuff in your clay. You can just pick it out or just clean the rolling pin, okay? There are tools, machines that we can use to roll out slabs, all right? I haven't taught you guys how to use them yet, so you're not gonna be using it, but we have one in the room. It's back there. It's called a slab roller. And basically it just works like I'm gonna say like a paper press, if you guys know what that is, but basically it has two wheels, okay? And you put the clay in the middle and it rolls through and it flattens it out. Or like if you guys have ever watched a baking show, right? And they put like fondant through those rollers, or even Play-Doh. All right, so when you are happy with the thickness, it should not be any thicker than like, I wanna say 1/4 inch. This is still kind of a little bit thick. This side's getting thin. All right, so once you've gotten your clay to be a good thickness, okay, for you, you see it's like getting stuck to the table a little bit. So I just want to smooth this out. So depending on the shape that you want, what I would do, you have two options. You can either draw out a template and trace the template, okay? You can find something around the room that might be a good width for you. You could use a protractor and you could put the pencil in, you could take a measure around. That's really if you want a perfect circle. If you just want some random shape that you've made up in your head, I would take my pin tool. There's gotta be a pin tool in here. No pin tool. Okay, well, that's obnoxious, but that's okay. I would take a pin tool. I don't have a pin tool, and I'm not gonna get up and get one, so I will just use my knife, okay? And I'm going to come up with a shape. So, First thing I would do is I would just draw, depending, none of my sketches are gonna resemble the shape that I'm making. So I'm just gonna go for it here. I'm gonna draw out this kind of abstract, rounded shape. All right, and that would be, if I was happy with that, that would be the base of my pot. If I'm not happy with this, I can just smooth over it and redraw it. Okay, so make sure you don't cut. You always want to draw before you cut. So if this is my base, I'm like, okay, that works for me. I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna cut it. Please don't cut my table. Clay is very easy to cut. It's not a difficult, cut. You don't have to be very hard on it. And then you just pick up the excess, okay? So if this is my base, then I need to add some coils to it. Please make sure you pick up your bases. This is kind of thick, but make sure you pick up your base so that it's not stuck to the table. You don't want to start building on the table and then not be able to pick your piece up later on. So I'm just gonna leave that there. I'm gonna go grab some slip. Once you have your base, you wanna make some coils. Try not to make the coils too long or skinny. If they're really skinny, they're just gonna break, and if they're too fat and too short, it's not gonna make it all the way around. Again, this is a pretty large base. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to make a coil that goes all the way around that base. Making your coils, the same thing as when you're using the rolling pin. You wanna think of going down and out, okay? Not just smushing down into the table. Sometimes it's easier if you do it while you're standing. It's really up to you guys. But you don't want the coils too thick. I'm sorry, I should have like pre-made coils before the class. All right, and then if you have a thick space, you just push down and over. You can also separate your fingers. It'll help move the coil out instead of down. If you notice that you're getting flat coils, you're probably just pushing too hard down on the table, and you gotta think more out. Your coils, super, super, super important to slip and score them, okay? So this clay is really wet, and if I had a bunch of coils and I was working this class, the first one I would slip and score, and then other ones I could probably just add on and smush together if you're choosing to smush them together. But if you're not going to smooth them, then you need to slip and score each one on. Also, in that video that I showed you, the video of the woman, she twisted her coil, okay? That also helps to elongate them. So if you want to give your coil like a little twist and then you roll it out, it'll help make it longer. All right, so once you have the first coil, this is like perfect, almost perfect. All right, I'm gonna shorten this a little bit. Wonderful. All right, so once you have the first coil that's long enough, you want to score. Then you want to add some slip. I'm just going to use a paintbrush. You guys can use whatever tools you want. Paintbrushes work just fine in my opinion, because you don't want too much. You just want to get enough in there. Some people use with really wet clay. Some people just use water, which is an option. You just have to be careful. You have to know when to use it. If you put your project away and you come back a day or two later, you're not going to want to just have water being put onto your project, because then it's not going to stick together. Okay. So once I have my slip there, for this, I know it sounds crazy, but for this, I'm actually not going to score this whole thing like with the little X's. I'm just going to go along and just do like one little pattern here. It'll be enough to get it to stick together. All right, and then obviously the X side goes down. Now, what I'm doing is I'm pressing down as I go along, and you should see the slip kind of like smushing out. All right. Yeah. Okay. And again, once you're done with this, you're gonna need to pick it up to make sure that it's not stuck to the table, which I can't emphasize enough. You really don't want your project to be stuck to the table. Now, when you get here, I'm not just gonna like take this and layer over it. What I like to do personally to make it a really nice, a nice edge or a nice cut is you cut on an angle. Some people will do this before, but I'm not going to, okay? So I cut on an angle, and then of course, you need to score both sides, add a little bit of slip, and seal it together, okay? Just because you put slip in there, it doesn't actually seal it. You need to do the work with your hands to make it look like one piece, okay? Now, as I look at the outside of this, I realize how terrible it looks, but that's okay. So what I'm gonna do now is either on the inside or on the outside, depending on how I want it to look, I need to smooth it together. You can use wooden tools. Did I not grab a wooden tool? You can use wooden tools, and you can go around the outside and you can smush it together. You can do the same thing on the inside. And when you're doing this, you wanna bring the clay both ways. So if you're working on the inside, you're actually just taking the coil and smushing it down to the base. If you're working on the outside, because there's gonna be extra clay, you wanna bring the base up to the coil and the coil down to the base. Okay, so it really just depends. So if I'm working the inside, again, I would just go like this and I would seal around this edge. You have to do it one way or another or both ways. Just gonna grab this. This is called a banding wheel. Okay, I'm just gonna work on top of it so I can go around in a nice little circle here. All right, so again, you can do this with a tool. You could do this with the back of your fingernail. And I'm supporting with my left hand in order to ensure that I'm not gonna have like a blowout on the wall here, okay? So I'm just going around and sealing my edge. You wanna make sure you're cleaning up this part as soon as possible, because what's gonna happen as you go taller, you're not gonna be able to get into these little divots. So once I have that done, it doesn't look that great, so I'll go around and I'll smooth it out with my finger. Again, you could use a tool for this. It's really up to you. If you prefer to work with tools, that's fine. If you prefer to work more naturally, work with your hands. It's easier to feel the shape with your hands, but some people don't like the way clay feels, and so they prefer to work with tools. Or they're just very clean people. I'm not really a tidy artist, I guess you could say. So this is going to take the longest, the first coil, until you have everything set. And once it's set, you want to make sure you have enough of a surface area to put your next coil on. Okay, so if you're happy with that, then you can keep going. I look at the outside, it's not that nice, but I'm not gonna actually touch the outside right now because there's not enough for me to work with. Like it's too flimsy, okay, it's too small. So what I would do is I would go ahead and make another coil. This I might do over half of it. So the last coil I connected right here, okay? So I'm just gonna actually leave this here so you guys can see that. So the last coil was connected right there. And the next coil needs to be connected in a different area, okay? If you connect the coils in the same area, what's gonna happen is you're gonna have a very weak pot and it might end up ripping or breaking because it's not as strong. Obviously where you connect it is not gonna be as strong as all of the clay bonded together that you've rolled. don't connect the coils, or I would not recommend connecting the coils until you have a couple of them rolled out, because it's going to be a very long process, like what's happening right now. I would make 3, 4, 5 coils and then connect them. Okay, so now if I have this next coil, this base is very large. Okay, I'm going to start with the coil on this side, and I'm going to connect it on the opposite side. It doesn't have to be the exact opposite side where you connect, but it needs to be somewhere else. It could be here, it could be here, it could be here, it could be anywhere else. Okay, now you'll notice that there's an opening over here. If I want to add a design in here, like some balls or something, I could just leave that there and I could come back to it later. I'm going to leave an opening for my pot right now, right there, okay? Now, again, when you're connecting these, okay, you can't just sit the coil on top, you actually have to connect it. So whether you're going to score remember, I'm leaving an opening somewhere, so I probably just scored right over that, but we're gonna ignore that. I'll come back to it later. Doesn't have to be anything crazy. Add a little bit of slip or water. The slip is not very watery. Take my coil. Add it on. And now again, just because I added slip, just because I'm pushing it on doesn't mean that it's actually going to stay. I need to somehow connect them. So whether it's pushing down and connecting them by giving pressure, or smoothing them. My coil just ripped. Okay. Remember, we have an opening here. So if you stack on top of your coils, okay, it's going to go pretty much straight up. If you put the coil on the outside, it's going to go out. And if you put it on the inside of the last coil, it's going to go in. So that's how you can kind of build. So then again, I'm going to go around and I'm going to smooth this out. And this is how I'm going to connect this pot. The bigger your coil pots get, the more likely it is that you're going to need some type of tool to go in and help you, because they're just going to be like too deep in order to get your hand in. Okay, going around, connecting, doing this. You can also, if you don't like the way this is looking, you can take a sponge and you can smooth the inside, all right? And then just know, like, if you have some issues on the outside, you can heal them up whenever. Okay. All right, so now that I have this opening here, if I want to maybe add design in, remember you can always add in different decorations, different whatever. I want to put in, maybe I want to put in little balls, so I could go ahead and I could make them. And you could put them anywhere. You can't just stick them on. You need to slip and score them. But for now, while I'm deciding how many I want or how big I want them to be, I'm going to sample them out. And then I would slip and score them together. So the option now, if I had these here, my next coil could go over them, and over here, I could leave it empty again. I can do whatever. You just don't want to build like a huge wall of rocks or circles and then have all this open, because it's probably going to fall over. So you need to do a little bit here, a little bit around it, a little bit there, a little bit around it, and keep going, like build as like levels. Okay. What else can you do? You can braid the coils. That's totally up to you. Figure out some design that you want. This is very sloppy, so I'm going to personally go in and fix this all before I were to move on. Again, picking up your coil pots, Picking up your coil pot to make sure that it's not stuck to the table is super important. Be careful because this can be very flimsy. I have boards that you guys can work on top of. So at the end of class, all you're gonna do is take your bag, so if you have your project on a board, spray it a little bit. I need to get spray bottles for you guys. You're gonna spray it a little bit and then you just take the bag and completely wrap your project up. If it's on a board, it's gonna be easier because you're just moving that board, okay? I have some over there, I have some on the other side, and then we're gonna be doing our best to use our class as shelves, but we'll probably have to extend past that. Always remember where you leave your project, okay? And that's pretty much that for this. So what I want you guys to do now after watching that is to think about what your project's gonna be, okay? And next class, we're gonna go ahead and get started, but for today, I just want you to kind of assess in the next 10 minutes what you were thinking, if it's gonna be possible, and like a serious size. Do you want the base to be big? Do you want the base to be small? Are you going out? Are you going in? Okay? And again, if you want to work out on your project, you could take these coils, right? And you could either put it on the outside if you wanted to go out, or if you wanted to go in, you put it on the inside and shape your pot in.
What about just straight up?
If you want to put it straight up, just put it right on top. And then it'll keep going straight, okay? Eventually, you might need some type of shaping. So like this base is actually very small, and I put the coils on the outside to build out, which is how it gets that V shape, okay? Make a coil, okay? So you can make a coil, and then you can roll it up like a snail shell, all right? So in order to do that, take your coil and you just roll it into itself. I would say if you're making something that's a circle, this is a totally fine technique to use. If you're not making something that's a circle, you might want to rethink what you're doing. Okay, if you want it to be like a bunch of different shapes, maybe you have a circle, you want another circle, that's an option. Okay, so I rolled this up and it's like a little shell here. Now this is a very tiny base, so if you want to do something like this, you might need a really long coil or multiple coils. Remember, you can't just stick this on and hope for the best. You actually need to slip and score it on. So if I want this to be bigger, I'm gonna score, add some slip, put it on, connect it, and then I can keep going. Just because I rolled it, it doesn't actually mean it's connected. It will easily just fall apart, okay? So you need to decide if you're gonna smooth one side. Because of the way this looks, I'll probably smooth the bottom side. So what I would do is I would smush this together. Okay, so I'm healing this. I'm actually going to take my rolling pin and I'm gonna flatten this out a little bit just because I want it to be a little bit bigger. You still see the exposed coil on the other side, but this side not as much. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a wooden tool, or there's some rubber ribs. This one's a metal one, but there's rubber ones up in the front of the room. And what you can do is you could actually just take this, you put your thumb in the middle, okay, and it bends in between your hands. And then you could just smooth this out. And by smoothing it out, you're healing together. You're making the clay from multiple pieces into one piece. Now, obviously you're gonna have a smooth side, you're gonna have a coiled side. Make sure you pick it up so you can still see the coils on that other side, but one side is smoothed and one side is coiled. the air bubbles in that little pocket that you've created. So you go around and smooth it out. Okay, so now I have like the start of a little pot here. Something you guys need to know, all right, which I was gonna start doing on this one. And I'm sorry I can't hold this one up. But if I have these balls that I'm gonna put on here and make like little connectors, if I want the pot to go in or get smaller, you wanna put it on the inside of the coil. And you can see this is not connected. I'm just placing these here just to show you. Okay, so you see how it's like angled inwards? So for those of you that are in the back, you can see it's got like an inward angle. If you want your pot to go out, you could do the same thing and put it on an outward, it's not gonna work with that. You could put it on an outward angle, okay? And you could do this with a coil. You could do it with the decoration. It doesn't really matter, all right? But if you want it to go out, you put it on the outside of the coil and work out. It's always gonna go up because you're adding a coil, so it has to get higher as you work. But obviously you're gonna need more coils if you're going out and in and out and in and all over the place. Okay, so now when you're connecting your coils, all right, I have, this one you can't really see. All right, so for this one, it's over here. So I added the coil, I connected the coil over here on this side, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna put my little pin here, where's that? Just so you guys can see it as a visual representation. So my next coil that I put on, okay, I'm gonna put the middle of the coil to wherever I started or ended the last coil, if I were to put it on, and I'm gonna go around, and I just want this to go straight up right now. So I'm going directly on top of the coil. I'm gonna make a little cut, okay? And then I would seal. So this is where my original coil was connected. Okay, the first one on the pot. Now I'm gonna connect this one on the opposite side. You wanna always change where you're connecting your coils, because if you keep doing it in the same spot and you make this huge pot, it's going to be very weak in that one spot and it's likely to rip. So what you wanna do is, if you connect the coil here, you can connect the next one there, the next one there, the next one there. I don't care what pattern you work in or if there's no pattern or whatever. You just can't keep doing it in the same exact spot because it will become weak. So once you have your second coil, okay, if you're here during one class and you have like 10 coils, all right, you can add them on, slip and score to connect them, and you can mush them together. If you, for some reason, only do one coil in a class and you come back next class, you need to slip and score that first coil back on, okay? Because you're attaching two different moistures of clay. So your main pot would be more dry than your new clay. So you need to slip and score. So again, you just go around, score. Coil pots are easy to make in the sense that they are quick. They're easy to build. Coils are one of the fastest ways to build and a very strong way to build. Because they're strong, generally they come up a little bit heavier than other things, like things to run on the wheel are not gonna be as heavy as a coil pot. The thickness of coils makes the pot heavy, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna put this on here. I told you guys I wanted to go straight up. So I'm going directly on top of the last coil. Okay, I'm pushing down. And then I'm gonna score my ends, add some slip in there. Okay, if you're a very neat person, you can work as neatly as you'd like. I'm not really a neat person when I work, so it looks really